Well, I actually damaged my front fenders. You guys know that this thing was sitting at about 2.5 inches lower than the factory ride height, just to see if these Vicres side splitters would look better on a slammed Q50. Well, they do look good, but they didn't look that bad before, and we just right now are at an impractical ride height. Front tire is tucked up in the front fender well or wheel well. The rear is not so bad, but I have discovered that pulling up into the driveway, it does touch right at the lip. It gets real tight right in that area. So it's just not practical for me. Everyday driving is not so bad, but you know, if you're getting into any steep driveways or even a normal driveway like ours, you can start pinching. But what really concerns me is the front. I don't know if it's picking it up on camera here. I'm trying to move it back and forth, but you can see, well, you can actually see some residue right here. Rubber residue. That's because, oh, look at that. That's because that front tire is rubbing right inside. So even dropping it down and having some pretty significant negative camber, it still rubs. And I don't really even turn that sharply that often. But it's not the rubber residue that gets me, it's that the fact that I can feel on the inside here that the tire has actually sort of rolled the inside of the fender on its own. And if you look closely, you can see that it bows out right here at this point. And that, of course, is from the tire hitting on the underside as I'm coming into a driveway, rubbing when it hits a bump, when the tires turn slightly. So it's just not ideal. It doesn't look that bad, but I really don't want to damage the fenders and I don't want to damage the paint. Can you see it there? You can kind of see it poke out if you look at the light. So when I say the fenders are damaged, they're obviously not ruined, but they are bowed out and I can see them when the light hits them in a certain direction, you know, when I'm parked in a parking lot or whatever. It does kind of bother me, but ultimately we don't want it to overheat from the tires rubbing it, causing the paint to fail. We don't want the paint to crack. We don't want to damage tires. You know, there's just a lot of reasons for why I'm going to raise this up, and we're going to find a practical ride height today. I'm just taking some measurements here to the highest point of the front fender opening, and we're about 25 and 3/4 or 25 and maybe 13/16. So pretty low. You're about exactly the same on the other side as it should be. The back is about 26 exactly. Passenger side rear is right about the same as well. Right at 26, just a touch lower. So that may be just variation in the garage floor. So we're gonna leave, I think we're gonna leave the rear. We have plenty of rake, so raising this front up, I think I'm gonna start with a 1/4 inch raising it up. That should still have a nice little rake to this car. It should still sit really well. The rear isn't necessarily an issue at the moment. It's more of the front. So I'm gonna take care of this. And then we'll see how it rides. We'll see how it goes. But I think 26 inches is good for the rear, actually. I'm actually pleased with that. It goes right to the top of the tread, and so that gap is all but eliminated just perfectly. The front is a concern. So I'm going up about, this is at right at a 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch from lip to lip. That should give us enough clearance, I hope, where we don't rub here, but it still keeps a nice gap. There you can definitely see some evidence of rubbing right in this area. Then right there. little wearing on that clip. Definitely pushed it in right in this region. Just analyzing the tire tread here a little bit too. This would be the inside shoulder. So you can see sort of, it almost looks like it's running more flat right here on this very edge of the shoulder compared to this. Looks like we have a pretty good contact patch still, but what we don't want is to wear the inside shoulder out prematurely. And being lowered about 2 inches, like I have been for the last several months after installing the BC coilovers, there wasn't any real unusual wear. Slightly faster on this side. You can see the outside shoulder still has these little nubs in the, and we do still on the inside shoulder as well, but some of them are missing, starting to get worn out. So we're wearing pretty evenly, but what we don't want to risk is wearing prematurely on the inside. I want to get as many miles out of these tires as possible, so I think it's good that we're raising it up another 1/4 of an inch in the front. Yikes. Whew. Still pretty low, but it's right on the edge of the sidewall, right where the tread starts. So I think I'm gonna like this. I think this should be good. I think this is going to be proper ride height now. Let's measure. It's about just shy of 26 1/4. Sitting pretty flush still. So we're gonna have a nice, oof, look how flush that is, golly. We're gonna have just a little bit of rake. I think it'll be perfect. So we didn't rub the fender backing out with the wheels locked, and we didn't scrub the underside of the car going out of the driveway. She still sits perfect. Okay, I think we nailed it, guys. I think this is the perfect ride height for the Q50, even if you have the Vicrez side splitters. Sharp. So actually, even though there's a slight bit of rake, the rear seems to sit actually lower than the front in terms of measurement, right at about 26, whereas the front is at 26 and a quarter. So I guess it's just how the car is designed. So we have rake, it's sloping down from the rear to the front, but actually when you measure it, the rear is lower. That's kind of weird. I don't know from this angle if you can see how that front fender got bent. You can just kind of see a little bit of wave in that fender opening now. Yeah, she's sitting just right. Well, that was the goal today, guys, and I think we accomplished it, finding the most practical ride height for the Q50. It sits perfectly where it looks amazing. It looks, oh God, it looks good. It looks super, super good. Has a nice rake. The wheel gap is all eliminated, but we're not rubbing the fenders. Rear tires sit perfectly flush in the wheel well. The front tires, the gap has been eliminated, sitting right at the edge of the sidewall. But we're not rubbing, we're not scraping going out of the driveway on the underside of the vehicle. So I think for all intents and purposes, this is the most practical ride height for the Q50. It should handle really, really well. It's essentially lowered as low as it can possibly go, but not hinder your daily driving, going in and out of driveways and going over speed bumps and things like that. But we're low enough to where we're gonna optimize its handling capabilities. If you were to leave for work and then go on a spirited drive after, that's perfect. You don't want to have to adjust your coilovers, every time you want to do a little bit of raging. This really is just right. We checked every single box. My dampening settings have remained the same. I'm about -6 or -5 or 6 in the front, so that's all the way to the stiffest, and then backed it off 5 or 6 notches. The rear is right at about -11. So again, all the way to the stiffest setting, and then back it off 11 notches. It keeps it a little bit soft in the rear, or softer in the rear, in order to absorb some of those bumps so you don't lose control of your rear end, but stiff enough in the front, since it is so low that hitting bumps or going out of driveways, it keeps it a little bit stiffer so you don't get quite as much compression, quite as much travel, and therefore prevent rubbing as much as possible since we are this low. But I think these are the perfect settings, at least for my liking, in the Q50, but we got to get to the tail of the dragon, or at least the mountains in North Carolina, to really test this thing out and see if it's ideal for, raging in the mountains or raging in the canyons or a track day or whatever. So for practical purposes, as I said, which is the title of this video, I think these are the perfect settings. You can go in and out of driveways freely, go over speed bumps with no problem, maybe take a little bit of angle just in case, but it's still low enough to look really good, and still low enough to really handle some corners on a spirited drive if you want to hit one after work. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, I appreciate the continued support. More stuff coming up for the Q50 in the fall, and I've come to a conclusion of what I really want to do for the next project. We got to get rid of this Jeep. That's it. A couple more things to wrap up on it, and then I'm listing it. We're getting rid of it because I got my eye on something, and I know exactly what we're going to do. So stick around. You guys don't want to miss it. Thanks again for all the support. We'll see you in the next one.